All right, welcome to another episode of Enlightened Conversations. Really excited to introduce you guys to today's guest. We have Carmen de Luccio, who is a professional astrologer, and found him on Instagram and was on his page, and I could just see how much he enjoys impacting humanity and with the things that he's sharing. And so I'm excited for him to share with you guys today. And so without further ado from me, I want to introduce you guys to Carmen. And Carmen, if you could share with the audience so they're more familiar with you, who you are, what you do, why you do it, and all that good stuff.
Okay, so where do I start? So I'm an astrologer, and for people that I know nowadays, a lot of people are into astrology, and so I think the best way to start with this is like how I got into it.
Yeah.
Back in 2006, I was kind of going through like early to mid 2000s. I was kind of going through a little bit of a crisis in my life. I was trying to find my purpose. I was kind of unhappy with some of the things that were going on. I was learning a lot about conspiracies and things like that. And then something happened where I had like a bit of like I guess a spiritual awakening. And around that time period when that happened, I started becoming friends with more like conscious people. And one of them was actually studying astrology, and he had asked me for my birth time and birth location, and I was like, "Whoa, that must be very specific," you know? Because I was always open to astrology, like I always resonated with my sun sign, but when he asked that information, I'm like, that must be really exact. So, and I was already into numerology at the time, actually. So in that moment, at that time, like literally in that moment, I became obsessed with it. And I went home, I just, Googled it like crazy and just kind of started. This was in 2006. And what it's done for me and how I'm using it to help other people is that it came into my life at a time where I was trying to find my place in the world. Like, who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? And just to understand my potentials. And basically that's what I'm doing now with other people. Like I attract a lot of people that they're kind of in the same place. I also attract other types of clients that are doing maybe looking for other things too, but generally that's kind of what kind of got me into it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I love what you said right there. And just a great reminder for all of us. I always remind people that when something is attracted into our life and it's something that if we want to know, is this something that's going to be for me or not? The way that it feels, like how resonant you felt with that right away. And you said it, the exact quote, you said you became obsessed with it from that point on and went home and Googled it. I always remind people that when things are, coming into our life, when we're attracting them, at certain times when we're ready for them, it just feels so good. Like there was nothing that could stop you really from going home and Googling and doing all that stuff because it was just such a pull for you. So no, I love how you said that. That's awesome. Is that, so for you from that point, then did you know, like at that point, it just kind of started with you wanting to discover this kind of new world for you. And then what point did you say, well, I could use this to share with people and to help other people? Because you said you started attracting people into your life that you could kind of share this stuff with.
Well, at that time, I wasn't planning. I had other things that I was hoping to start helping people with it. I was thinking of that down the line, and my astrology showed that, right? So I knew that potential was there, but I also had other things I was doing at the time, and I wasn't planning on. I thought I was going to actually start doing it as a profession later in life, to be honest. But I was always studying it. I was always obsessed with it. I was always looking at astrology charts, looking at charts of family, friends for all those years. And then what happened was maybe I actually started doing readings maybe around 4 or 5 years later, a little like casually, and then or maybe before that, but I started like maybe charging money like 5 years later, and then it became full time like 8 or 9 years after that, after I started studying it. But I had other things that I was working on. I'm into like a little bit like alchemy. I'm into like herbs and superfoods and things like that. So I was actually doing stuff like that, and I might come back to it eventually.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so for my question then, for those that aren't as familiar with astrology, is what is like a typical process with you look like as far as what you ask for or need from them typically, and then what's kind of the depth that you normally share as far as giving people just insights that will help them. What does it normally look like with you?
Um, so basically, like when I work with people, I need to know their exact birth time, birth location, as accurate as possible. Sometimes people have an approximate time. I work with what I got. And then from there, I basically like review everything and I just share what I see with people. And then at that point, it's good to have a dialogue with, because when I'm looking at astrology, I'm looking at like energy, symbolism, but I don't know like the exact details, like the real life details. I just say I'm looking at someone's chart. I'll be like, yeah, you're going through something right now where maybe there's some complications in your career, but I don't know like the exact details, like you know what I mean. So
Mhm.
it's good to have a dialogue, and then when I have a dialogue with people, then I take what they're telling me and then I apply it to the symbolism that I'm looking at, and it really depends like what. And another thing that comes up for me is like I really like to focus on helping people to really focus on their strengths and what their soul wants to sort of create in this lifetime, the direction that, because there's certain parts of the astrology chart that will show like, if you do too much of this, it'll kind of hold you back. So you need to do more of that, kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
And so, if people aren't familiar with an astrology chart, I have an image of one. I can just go grab it and put it on the screen for people. But I think nowadays a lot of people, they can just Google it if they don't know what I'm talking about. But basically, an astrology chart is a wheel where all the planets at the time you're born is all mapped out, and it's very specific. Like most people are familiar with their sun sign. What's your birthday, by the way? What's your sign?
I'm Libra, October 6th, 1982.
Okay. Oh, same year as me. So, um, Libra, like, you're Libra, and other people will know, like, oh, I'm a Scorpio or whatever. But the day that you were born, your moon might be in Aquarius. You might be born during a first quarter moon or a full moon. Your Mars might be in Aries, like there's all these different things. And even though you as a Libra, you're going to have a lot of similar qualities as other Libras, but you're still different. You still have your own sort of unique expression of how you want to express yourself. And the thing is too is that when it also depends on like our level of consciousness, how evolved we are, how we project our energy, because your astrology chart also depends on like how you project your energy. So like before I had an awakening, before I was on this path, I was still living my astrology chart, but I was expressing my astrology chart at a lower level of consciousness, right? I was using the ingredients in my chart in a way that was less evolved or less of service to humanity, or less focused on like a spiritual path, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I love what you said, something right there, that because obviously what's cool at having these conversations, and I knew having you on here today, is you you know more about astrology than 99.999% of the population because of your life experience, and it's just drawn you to that, and it's just part of your purpose
Yeah,
here on this planet, which is awesome. It's what's so fun for me sharing a planet with 7.7 billion people, because we all have these different life experiences that we can choose to share, or just be beneficial for ourselves or whoever's around us. But you said something there, even as an astrologer, something that I remind people of, and my knowledge is like I don't know a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what you know about astrology, but I still will remind people that because there's 7.7 billion people on the planet, just because you might be the same sign as someone doesn't mean that you don't have the same life experience. So you're still going to have many differences, and you're going to look at the
yeah,
world differently, because there's probably mathematically there's probably 600 million plus of each sun sign on the planet. um,
yeah,
so I thought like that you said that too, because I mean, sometimes people will think that everything single thing, like they're almost using what they read about as far as their sign as the story that they're going to tell about themselves, from that point on because of what they're reading. So,
but one simple thing though, since we're on the topic, that I would suggest to people is that even though everyone's going to have different qualities, everyone has their chart's going to be different. Whatever your sun sign is, like with you being Libra, I'm a Taurus. You want to look at what, like, you can go online, do your own research, but you want to look at like what are the most positive qualities that sign could have, and try and strive to strive for that. That's sort of like a simple little tip, that things in their astrology that might show something a little different, but generally speaking, like whatever your sign is, like look at the most positive qualities and try to strive for that as much as you can. Try to like mastering your sign, because your sign, it's your sun sign, and the sun is in that sign. The sun wants to shine in that way. It's different than having the moon in a sign, or your Mercury, or whatever. This is the sun. This is how you want to express your ego, how you want to express your conscious self, how you want to shine. Right. So like, if you ever look at like a lot of actors or things like, and certain types of performers and things like that, a lot of times the best roles that they get are roles that really fit their sun sign. The ones that they do the best in, the ones that they really excel in, right? And so it's like something that people might want to consider.
That's awesome advice. Just for the sheer fact that if someone were to strive for the most positive attributes of their sign, that's what their mind and their attention is going to be focused on, as far as, an intention for them going out into their day. And I know that works 100% because I had a point in my life where I had a blind spot that was uncovered for me that I didn't realize was negatively affecting my energy on a daily basis. And it was just really just being critical of myself, critical of others sometimes, and not realizing that I was doing it, because it wasn't something that I was like speaking out. Like I wasn't like going out in the world and like being mean to people, but it was even just like critical thoughts that could be about something on TV or just something going on in the world, and not realizing that on a daily basis that was affecting my energy. So I just set the intention to, and not that this is, I mean, it might be, I don't know enough about my sign to know if it would be one of them, but I'm sure there's something on there where if I was striving for this, it would help. But I just set the intention to be, accepting, and to be, empathetic and compassionate and kind. And just, these are the things that I just wanted to strive for as I was going to live my day. And that became my focus, and it became a habit for me. And so, if I saw myself being critical towards myself or others, I catch it early on, and because I was set the intention of being accepting and compassionate and kind, and all these things. So I know what you're describing would work 100% for anyone, because that would be what their attention would be on. So that's great. That's great advice. Okay, so question that I've been asking, pretty much everybody that's been a guest here, because now at this point you've had tons of life experience, just overall, but then also doing what you do with astrology. I always share with people the reason that I started just sharing things that I've become aware of about life and energy and manifestation, and any of the stuff that I've chosen to share over the years has been because today is the only day promised to any of us. And, I asked myself, if today were my last and I left the earth, had I at least, got on this, amazing tool that we all have access to, the internet, some things that I feel could help people that I become aware of, that if people that had come before me, whether it be authors or coaches or whoever, that if they hadn't written the books or created the videos or done the podcast, maybe I wouldn't have got that information and it benefited me the way it did. So I just started sharing. So for you, the things that you become aware of, what's something that you definitely want the listeners to know that you feel could impact them whenever they were attracted to this episode?
Astrologically related, or just in general? Or?
It could be anything, but yeah, you could tie it to anything. Just that's something that you want to make sure that whenever someone is attracted to this episode, you're like, okay, if they heard that from me, that they got something that could help their life for sure. It could be astrological or anything. It's up to you.
Oh, that's a tough question. Okay. I don't think this is going to apply I don't think anything could apply to everybody, to be honest. But one of the things things that had the biggest impact on me spiritually. Like, I'm an earth sign. I have a lot of earth. So it could apply to a lot of people, but it's going to especially apply for earth people. And I just sharing this because I'm just coming from my own experience was when I had my own sort of like spiritual awakening or activation or whatever you want to call it, back in 2006, the thing that really did it for me was I started consuming blue-green algae. And blue-green algae is, there's different kinds of blue-green algae. There's spirulina, which is more popular, but there's one that comes from right now. Whenever I talk or anything, I drink it because it helps, like, it's kind of has that very activates me a lot. The first time I tried this stuff back in 2006, within minutes, I'm like, I felt something going on. And basically, like, algae, this is something I'm really passionate about, so I'm sharing it. Blue-green algae is one of the first life forms on the planet. Blue-green algae is the cusp between life on Earth and the sun, right? It's the beginning of life on Earth. We come from that, right? So it was very symbolic for me to start consuming algae, and it was like, it almost like it kind of reawakened my soul in a way. And it's actually interesting that we're talking about it because it's, as we're doing this recording, it's Scorpio season, and blue-green algae is associated with Scorpio. It has regenerating properties. It could have activation and transformational quality properties. It helps to detoxify. It helps to it has so many, like from a medical physical perspective, it has so many benefits. But from I think it's the, you hear throughout time, people are always looking for, like, alchemists were trying to discover the elixir of life. They're trying to figure out the elixir of life. This stuff here is Earth's elixir of life. This is an elixir of life that exists in the wild. The problem with majority of algae on the Earth are toxic. There's algae growing everywhere. You can't ingest them. But this one is safe for humans to ingest. And then there's also spirulina, but spirulina doesn't have the same, like, this is this algae is a much higher vibration. It's at a higher level of consciousness, this algae, right? And just so that foods, superfoods, because even if you eat organic, if you're just eating like fruits and vegetables, those are farmed foods. They're dependent on humans. They have a lower level of consciousness. But when you start eating more wild foods, superfoods, they're more, they have more like God energy, put it like that. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. And I've heard of blue algae before, and I can't remember if I've had some. It wasn't probably in as pure a form as where do you get yours right now? What's
So this one, okay, so it comes from a lake in Oregon. It's called Klamath Lake, and it's on the border of it's near Northern California. It's close to the border of California, and so what happened was 7,000 years ago there was a volcano that erupted there, and so what happened was all the volcanic ash is like all in the soil in that area, and the bottom of the lake is like, it's all volcanic minerals. And the lake is surrounded by like forests. Like there's not really much pollution or anything, and even the conditions, like the weather in that area is very lake. But the best company that has the best harvesting methods is called E3 Live. You can find it at a lot of health food stores. E3 Live, and then there's E3 AFA, there's a powdered version, and E3 Live is the frozen version. The frozen is more live, it has more life force, but the powder is really good. It's more economical and it's more consistent. So I would be careful. The problem is other companies that harvest it, the thing is that there's toxins that grow with the algae, and like there's other companies that harvest it, they don't separate it from the toxin properly. So you have to be careful, because I had them tested. I've tested different versions of it on biofeedback devices, and some of them, like this one, always comes out good, and I've tested other ones and it didn't come out very good. So I would stick to that company, and there's other brands that actually buy it from them and they just rebranded it. So, but just to be safe, stick to that one.
Okay. No, great advice. Thank you for sharing that. So that's why I asked the question like that, because if I would have said specifically to astrology, you probably wouldn't have shared that. And that
Yeah.
that could benefit me or anybody else listening. So I'm happy that you shared that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and just as a little disclaimer, there might be the odd person that might not do well with those. You know what I mean? They might not, their body might not, but they might want to try other foods or herbs like mushrooms or medicinal mushrooms or things like that, right? Like something. It's going to have these kinds of things in your diet, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I love it. Well, that's awesome. Okay. So just switching back just to make sure, because I know there's somebody listening to this podcast right now that has never, done anything with astrology and is thinking about, having a reading done. And is that something that they could, one, contact you for, and then two, what is your advice to people as far as if they're considering it, what, they could receive from it for themselves in your experience from what you've seen clients that have come to you receive for themselves?
So yeah, like people, sorry, I got mixed up with your last question, but if people want to get a reading, they can just, go on my page. You can go on my Instagram page. There's a link where they can order. I'm also willing to offer, I can create a discount code for anybody that listens to your podcast. I can give it 15% off. They can just type Noel 15.
Awesome.
If that works, or if you have another idea, I can.
No, that's awesome. That's easy too. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that.
I was thinking of this when you said it.
Oh, yeah, no, that's awesome. And the question just was, if someone is, they're like, oh, this is cool. Like I would want to, I think I would want to get a reading. What would, just coming from you, what would you say they might, from what your other clients you've seen people, kind of receive the benefits from that and just being more aware of themselves? What's just something that you would say, yeah, do it, because I've seen people that have, what's some encouragement that you can give for people that are considering having a reading done?
Okay, I got it. So, sometimes like when people come for a reading, I might tell them things that they might already be feeling already. You know what I mean? But when you have another person look at it objectively and tell you something you're already feeling, it gives them more confidence and encouragement to do what they've been already intuitively feeling that they should do. Number one. Number two is sometimes people don't, there might be certain patterns that you have in your life, or certain things that you attract, or certain situations or circumstances that keep coming up in your life. But astrology can also show, like, sometimes in certain situations, I could give people suggestions to how to work with that energy in a way that's more harmonious or more productive, or less malevolent or something like that, right? So yeah, and then when I'm doing like forecast kind of work, like if people come to me and they want to know what's going on for the next year, which is usually always in most of my readings anyways, it's kind of like a weather report. Like if it's going to be raining tomorrow, you're going to bring your umbrella, right? So it's kind of like with astrology. If okay, this next year you're going through like some kind of heavy Saturn influence, I'm going to advise people, okay, well, like for example, this is something that a lot of people can use, is at roughly around like late 20s, early 30s, especially around the age of 29. For everybody, it might start a little bit different. Everyone has what's called the Saturn return. It's when Saturn comes back to where you were when you were born. It completes a full orbit. And at the Saturn return, that's when you really become an adult. That's like when Saturn has to do with responsibility, maturity. You need to get your life together more. You need to, certain things that maybe you used to get away with, you might not get away with anymore. Like this is, and if they don't do that, then they might be more responsible or force them to be more disciplined. But then other people might take that information and they'll actually be proactive, and they'll use their, they'll do it intentionally. They'll work with what I'm telling them, and then it'll be less of a shitstorm for them.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, if it's raining, here's your umbrella. Take your umbrella. That's awesome. Yeah. I like it.
And I think sometimes like one of the big debates that's been going on. Astrology is thousands of years old, right? And one of the debates that people are still debating is whether or not we have free will, or whether or not everything's fated, right? And this is, we're still debating it, right? And I like to approach it in a way where we do have free will, and that our free will is co-creating with the astrological conditions. But I also believe that there's certain things that might happen in our life. I think certain things could be fated. And I think a lot of it depends on like where you are in your soul's journey, past lives, things like that. And at the same time, I don't think we're not really meant to know everything. There always has to be a certain level of mystery. Like and even as an astrologer, I'm just interpreting things based on my perspective, based on my reference points, based on, and we're always doing that with everything, right? But there's always, we're not meant to know everything. We're not God, and so, but yeah, I do think sometimes certain things, maybe certain major events in life might be fated before you were even born, or maybe there could be things you've done earlier in life, like with your free will, that might create a fated circumstance a couple years later. But your free will, I think it's always a dance of fate and free will. I think your free will is creating maybe fated things that might happen in a few years, and then when something happens that's fated based on previous free will decisions, then your free will responds to that, and it'll determine other fated things. And you know what I mean? Like that's how I view it, but I'm not even 100% sure. But I think, anyways, the point is that I think that's the most empowering, healthiest way to approach astrology, and I try to do that as much as I can in my work. Because the thing is that the astrological, all the astrology that you're going to experience throughout your whole life, like all the forecast stuff, is already predetermined before you're born. Like we know where the planets are going to be in the next thousands of years. Like we know, so the moment you're born, we already know. We can map out your whole life, like the whole astrology. But the thing is that it depends on how you're co-creating with that. And it's if somebody comes to me like with a child, a really young child, it's kind of hard for me to look at their 30s. Like I can see what the energy is in their 30s, but it really depends on what they do from when they're a child until then, right? If someone comes to me when they're like already an adult and they want me to look at the next year, then at least I have a reference point of where they are now, and then apply that to what I'm seeing. You know what I mean? So everything's kind of, your astrological conditions are already predetermined, but it's just how you're co-creating with those conditions, right? So, and you can have, for example, twins born like really close to each other, and so they're gonna go through all the same astrological conditions, but they're gonna go through it in a different way. Sometimes it might be very similar in some cases, right? But yeah, that's a whole other topic, twins, because there's other variables with twins. You might look at two twins and think like, oh, their lives are totally different, but it's actually they're experiencing the same things, just maybe on the surface it looks different, but they're actually experiencing the same things. And the little differences, like if they're born 5 minutes apart, for example, those little differences in those 5 minutes, which is something that most astrologers would never look at, those minor things become more accentuated, they become more significant, because twins are always trying to what's different about us, and those things get amplified more with the differences. So
that's awesome. You inspired me to say a couple of things right here that I'm going to share with the audience. And that's interesting what you were saying about twins. My dad and my uncle are identical twins. So if I ever choose to have kids one day, they say there's a possibility that I could have twin boys, hopefully, because twin girls would terrify me. That's another topic.
Maybe one of each.
Yeah, exactly. For sure.
One of each. It's Libra.
Boy to watch the girl while they're at school and I can't see. Dad can't see what's going on. Son, watch your sister. Yeah. You inspired me to say two things. One about free will, and then why I love astrology and just anything that can help us become more clear and just give us clarity, because that's what I see as astrology is doing every life experience helps give us clarity as far as, things that we now know, things that we didn't know before, things that we like, things we don't like. And that's what it's cool hearing you describe all the things you just described. The more that people become aware of all this stuff, some of the mysteries of the universe can be made more clear as far as, why certain things may be going on, or, why, your energy might feel a certain way at certain times. Like, that is very useful to know, because then it brings us back to, when it comes to free will, like for me, regardless of, all the different directions someone could take that conversation, I boil it down to this moment of time, which is the only thing that is promised or that I truly have control over, the eternal, right now. And so I know that I can choose right now to, I can be aware of my energy. I'm human, so I could be, sad, depressed, I could be joyful, happy, and everything in between, so that's part of the human experience, and it's all okay. It's all beautiful. If I'm aware of it, now I have a choice in this moment, though, if I want to, try to move that energy in a different direction. You don't have to, but for me, I enjoy living life, in the only moments that are promised a certain way. Like, I want to, appreciate being alive. I want to enjoy it as much as possible. Right now might not be the most blissful moment I've ever had in life. However,
Yeah.
I also would rather it not be the most powerless moment that I've had in life either. So just choosing to, my free will to control my energy as much as I can right now. So when it comes to free will, that's what makes it most important to me, is I know I have power of choice in the moment.
Yeah.
And beyond that I don't really need to.
You have the power how you decide to respond to what's
Exactly.
going on, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And then things like astrology and everything else, all the other tools that exist out there, and cool things that have existed for thousands of years, it just help us become more clear. It just gives us clarity, which helps us, choose how we want to respond to things. I think differently once we do become aware. So, no, that's awesome. You inspired all that out of me. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Well, awesome, man. Well, anything else you want to share with the audience before we go? But you've shared so many cool things, and you guys, all Carmen's information is here. You guys can click and definitely follow him on social media, on Instagram. And if you're inspired to do a reading, do it. I always strongly suggest anything that feels like an energetic pull towards, any decision in life, any experience in life. It's a really good choice, because that's going to lead giving you more life experience, more clarity, and allow you to choose for your life, differently after you have that life experience. So anything else you want to add at all before we sign off?
No, you were saying something that was triggering. Like, I wanted to kind of add to what you were just saying.
Say it.
But my mind is kind of, we're doing this podcast as it's Mercury retrograde right now. I don't know let's kind of talk about that once it's getting released, like right after or next week or something after we do it.
So
I guess it doesn't matter.
Well, it's interesting you said it, because I'm considering starting to release 2 a week again. I was releasing a lot per week before, and I took it down to 1 per week so it'd be more consistent. But I have, like, now with the recording of this one, I have two other ones recorded before you. So if I kept on a weekly basis, it will come out in 2 weeks. Not this Sunday, not the following Sunday. But so at the latest, 2 Sundays from now. But I might speed it up. We'll see.
Okay, so how about this? This kind of ties into everything. Whether or not, because right now we're in Mercury retrograde, and but this might come out after the retrograde is done or right at the end of it. But this is Mercury retrograde is a common thing that people. It's kind of really it's popularized now. Like there's mainstream media talking about it now. But one of the things I want to share with people, and this kind of ties into what we were talking about, like what you were saying, like how we respond, our choices, how we respond to the situation. Mercury retrograde is something that happens every 3 to 4 months. It's very, like 3-4 times a year, it's Mercury retrograde. And when Mercury goes retrograde is when it appears from our perspective to be moving backwards. Right? It's not technically moving backwards. It just appears to be moving backwards because of where it is in its orbit and where we are in our orbit around the sun. So it happens every 3 to 4 months for about 3 weeks, and then the weeks before and after are the transition periods. And so a lot of people are familiar with Mercury retrograde as a time where there could be more complications, there could be more technical difficulties, there could be miscommunications. maybe car problems, just delays, things like that, change of schedules, things like that. But Mercury retrograde is also a time where, and by the way, one thing I didn't mention is I write articles for every new moon, full moon, retrogrades. Like people, if they follow me, they'll see all my content. But one of the things that people should know about Mercury retrograde is Mercury retrograde is a time for you to see things in a new way, to shift your perspective around a certain situation in your life. It's a time where it's a good time to go more inward more. It's a time to really go with the flow more. So like a lot of times what could happen during Mercury retrograde is that let's say like you're trying to send an email, it's not going through, or maybe the reason, it could be frustrating, but maybe there's actually a deeper reason why it's not. Maybe something needs to be changed. Or let's say like you accidentally like lock your keys in the car, and then you're going to be, you can't show up to a meeting or something, maybe, but instead of going to that meeting, you went home and you came across something that you wouldn't have came across if it wasn't for that. You know what I mean? So the thing is that whenever it's Mercury retrograde, I'm suggesting to people to just, don't get frustrated with what's going on, and just flow with it, and allow yourself to sort of receive the insights and the gems that Mercury retrograde could offer you. Yeah, and then usually the couple following weeks after it, things start to flow a lot better. Like once the retrograde ends, slowly things start to flow a lot better. There's less resistance, there's less challenges. And what is Mercury trying to show you? What is it that you need to change or adjust or shift? Some retrogrades are going to be more significant. Some retrogrades might facilitate more significant changes or even transformations. I don't like to overuse the word transformations because it gets overused a lot, but some retrogrades every 4 or 5 years, you might have one that's very transformational for you. But other times they're minor. There might be minor changes, but it's just a period to see like, okay, what do I need to change? What do I need to do different in this situation, in this specific area of my life? It's not in everything, just maybe a specific area of life. So
I love that you just brought this up, because what Carmen just described is great practice. Like if you can get to the point, anybody out there listening, where, if something happens in your life or in your day that throws off the way that ideally you would want things to go, and you can, instead of cursing that situation like, oh, this sucks, and like just letting it throw your whole, day off, your whole energy off, which it could snowball and get worse and worse, by the way, if that's, where you let it go. But if you can instead ask yourself the question, what could this situation be trying to show me? What could possibly be in store? As soon as you said that, I thought of, and there's so many different scenarios like this that have happened in my life, where regardless if it was during Mercury retrograde or not, but then again, it's cool that now you have a little bit more clarity as far as you don't have to go too far into the why me thing, because regardless of why, it's something that happened, and then you get to choose how you respond to it. But I've had situations in my life, for instance, where I just, what you described, like a flight totally out of my control, like the connecting flight, the first flight was late and I missed the connecting flight. There's nothing that I could have done to get on the flight. And I'm asking, like, I'm going to miss a meeting in California. And it was just, I had no control. And then ended up meeting a guy that still 7 days later is a close friend of mine, sat right next to us on the plane, talked about business and life. And there was a reason why I was brought into his path, and there was a reason he was brought into my path. And it was just, would have never met this human being, like, ever, if it weren't for the changes that needed to be made. And that was a really good reminder. And so for everybody listening, if you can get to that point where, regardless of, what's going on and what's happening, you're human. So sometimes this might be easier said than done, but you can do it. If you choose to respond to things instead of, why me, you can kind of ask, well, what is there something that I, can experience that I wouldn't have otherwise, or something that I need to see or learn, or anything, any positive spin on it. You'll be shocked at some of the cool things that, synchronistically happen in life. So that's awesome advice. Yeah. That's cool. See, this is why I like these conversations a lot, because it's just more clarity. Like I hear the Mercury retrograde, used a lot. Like you said, has become pretty commercial. The one thing I will advise to anybody out there listening is just because of anything that you might learn and get clarity on when it comes to astrology or any of this stuff or anything else, your expectation also, you don't want to have expectations of really bad things happening because of certain times of the year or time when you're like, because the more that you expect things to, be off, you're just leaving yourself too open to attracting things that are off. But then you're human, you're going to experience life. So, there's not going to be all.
But you know what? I'm happy you mentioned that, because a lot of people that are into a lot of astrology enthusiasts and astrologers, they think the word, like whenever they see something coming up, they're like, that could be potentially negative. They think the worst of it. And so a lot of times it's not that bad as they thought, and it's good to exactly what you said, like, how you respond to things, but what you're projecting into that energy. And same thing with me with Mercury retrograde. Like Mercury retrograde for me is not as, it used to be worse, but now I know how to ride the wave. It's not as, there's periods where things come up that are beyond my control. There's some challenges that come up, but it's not going to write off your entire 3 weeks or whatever. Like, there just might be some little hiccups here and there. So yeah, and I think the more intuitive, the more conscious people are, it's easier to kind of flow with it. But again, there could be other variables too. So
for sure. If life was all rainbows and unicorns and candy canes, it'd be pretty boring. We wouldn't really create much. We wouldn't learn any lessons. Like there would be very little evolving for us to do while we're here. And I don't think we would really enjoy it after a while. So challenges are going to be challenging in the moment always, because we're human. And at the same time, it doesn't have to take us out of our whole 3 weeks, like you said. Like we could still, choose how we respond. So that's awesome. I'm happy you brought that up. Well, cool. Well, this has been a fun conversation, and one that I know people are going to be excited to listen to and to connect with you. And I'm happy that I've been able to connect with you now, Carmen, and appreciate you coming on and taking time to share the things that you've been inspired to share today. And it's been an awesome conversation. And if you have anything else to add on the way out, please do. But thank you for coming on and taking the time. You're awesome.
Yeah, no, thank you for reaching out to me. It was good to do this interview. I saw when you reached out to me, I was checking some of your previous ones, and I saw that you're really good at doing this. You're really good at engaging with people, interviewing people. Really good at, you got that Libra touch. And I just saw that. I'm like, yeah, it'll be good. So thanks for reaching out to me. Thanks for doing this. And,
yeah, it's a conversation that I would have wanted to have with you anyway. It's just we got to record it, and more people get to benefit from it. So that's why I told Carmen before we went on, I have one question that I'm going to ask you scripted, and then from there we're just going to talk about whatever comes up. So that's the way in life, that's how I would choose to have any conversation. Just see where it flows. So I appreciate it. Well, cool. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Enlighten the Conversation. Anyone that popped into your mind while listening to this episode that you want to share this with, definitely do so. It was not a coincidence. You could definitely benefit them, and that energy will flow back to you. It always feels good to uplift someone, and that's what this podcast is all about. So appreciate you guys. Continue to rate and review and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And we'll talk to you guys soon for another episode. Have an amazing, amazing day. Awesome. That was fun. That was fun, Carmen. I appreciate you, man. What part of the country are you in? Where are you? I didn't even ask you. Are you in that Oregon
I'm in
area?
Canada.
You're in Canada. What part?
Just north of Toronto.
Okay.
Just a little bit north of Toronto. I'm outside of Toronto.
Okay. Getting cold where you guys are now, I'm sure.
We got our first snowfall today. I just posted on Instagram. We had our first snowfall today.
Nice.